It's 1983. You're 10 years old standing next to your father as he walks into the local bank. You watch him hand over his paycheck and deposit it like he has done countless times before. He has worked for the same company for 15 years. Every 2 weeks, the same paycheck arrives. The bank teller recognizes him. His future feels predictable. He has a pension waiting for him, savings growing with interest, and a mortgage that will be completely paid off in just over a decade. Everything is moving according to plan. The message you grow up hearing is simple. Work hard, stay loyal, save your money, and eventually you'll earn a comfortable retirement. And for a while, that formula actually works. Now jump ahead to 2008. You're 35 years old. You followed every rule you were taught. You worked hard, you saved, you invested in your retirement account. You bought a home because everyone said that was the responsible thing to do. Then everything collapsed. Your 401k suddenly loses half its value. Your house, the symbol of financial security, drops dramatically in worth. The company that promised stability begins eliminating positions, including employees who gave decades of their lives to the organization. People with 20 or 30 years of loyalty walk out carrying boxes filled with their belongings. The promise your parents believed in starts to feel broken, and that experience permanently changed the way Generation X thinks about money. Here's the interesting part. Generation X, born between 1965 and 1980, developed one of the most complicated financial mindsets of any generation. Their relationship with money appears full of contradictions. They are deeply worried about retirement, yet they are among the most consistent retirement savers. They can be extremely cautious with everyday spending, but willingly spend thousands on experiences and memories. They question corporations, governments, and financial institutions, yet they continue showing up to work every day and building their careers. So how can the same group of people behave in such opposite ways? How can a generation that fears they won't have enough money for retirement still contribute aggressively to their retirement accounts? How can people who watched their parents lose financial security still use debt strategically instead of avoiding it completely? How can someone carefully save every dollar for emergencies but still spend thousands every year on concerts, vacations, and experiences? The answer comes from understanding what shaped them. According to retirement studies, a large percentage of Generation X adults feel anxious about their financial future and retirement. They worry that the traditional path may not provide the security they were promised. Yet despite that fear, they continue contributing heavily toward retirement plans. They may not fully trust the system, but they still prepare for it. That is one of the defining characteristics of Gen X money behavior: skepticism combined with action. Research also shows that Gen X has higher levels of entrepreneurship and additional income sources compared with many other generations. Many created side businesses, freelance careers, consulting work, or alternative income streams. This wasn't always driven by ambition alone. For many, it came from a desire for protection. They watched what happened when people depended completely on one employer. They saw companies restructure, pensions disappear, and loyal employees suddenly become replaceable. The lesson they learned was simple: never depend on only one source of income. Psychologists describe this mindset as defensive pessimism. It means expecting that something could go wrong, preparing for the worst-case scenario, and then performing effectively because you already planned for problems. It is not simply negativity, it is a survival strategy. Generation X grew up during a period when the traditional idea of job security started disappearing. They experienced economic uncertainty, changing workplaces, and eventually the massive financial crisis of 2008. They are not pessimistic because they naturally expect failure. They became cautious because they personally witnessed promises being broken. Think about the image that shaped many Gen X adults. A person who worked at the same company for decades suddenly loses their job. They walk out with a cardboard box containing their personal items. Years of loyalty do not protect them. That image created a powerful belief. A company can change its mind. An institution can fail. A backup plan is necessary. This explains why so many Gen X individuals created side hustles, started small businesses, invested in additional income sources, or developed skills outside their main careers. It wasn't always about becoming rich, it was about becoming harder to destroy. Generation X also has a unique relationship with borrowing money. They experienced the explosion of consumer debt and later watched the consequences of uncontrolled borrowing during financial crises. But their conclusion was not all debt is bad. Instead, they created a distinction. Good debt has a purpose. They are more willing to use debt for things they believe can create value, buying property, investing in businesses, or building assets. But they are far more cautious about high-interest consumer debt, especially credit cards. To them, some debt is a tool, other debt is a trap. They learned that borrowing money without a clear plan can become a cycle that never ends. One of the biggest financial contradictions in Generation X is how they balance saving and spending. They may refuse to upgrade a perfectly working car. They may repair an old appliance instead of replacing it. They may carefully watch everyday expenses. Then they might spend hundreds or even thousands on travel, concerts, or experiences. To outsiders, this looks inconsistent, but psychologically it makes sense. Gen X grew up watching financial security disappear. They saw homes lose value, companies collapse, and possessions lose meaning during economic downturns. A physical object can lose value, a car depreciates, a house can become worth less than the mortgage, a possession can disappear, but an experience becomes a memory. That concert from decades ago cannot be taken away. That family trip cannot be repossessed. Those moments remain valuable regardless of market conditions. In an uncertain world, experiences feel like a safer investment. Generation X is also unique because they were raised during the transition between traditional information and the digital world. They are the last generation that strongly believes in learning through books, research, and personal investigation. They watched experts fail. They watched financial professionals make mistakes. They watched institutions that were supposed to provide security collapse. So they developed a habit: question everything. They research before making decisions. They compare options. They manage their own investments. They want to understand the details instead of blindly trusting someone else. It is not necessarily arrogance. It is a response to disappointment. They believe knowledge creates protection. Generation X appears contradictory because their financial habits were created in response to a contradictory world. They save aggressively because they fear instability. They spend on experiences because they know nothing is guaranteed. They use debt carefully because they understand leverage. They create extra income because they do not trust a single employer. They educate themselves because they learned that even experts can be wrong. Every behavior connects back to one central belief: security cannot be given, it has to be built. The financial formula their parents followed was based on stability: work for one company, collect a pension, own a home, retire comfortably. Generation X discovered that the world had changed, so they created a new formula: build multiple income streams, learn constantly, use debt strategically, save consistently, value experiences, never depend completely on one system. They didn't reject the old rules completely, they adapted them. Remember that 10-year-old child standing beside their father in the bank in 1983. That child learned that hard work creates security, but decades later they also learned something else. The rules can change, companies can fail, markets can collapse, promises can disappear. So they continued playing the game, but they stopped assuming the game was guaranteed to be fair. That isn't simply pessimism, it is experience, it is adaptation, It is the financial mindset of a generation that learned security is not something you receive from an institution. It is something you create yourself. Your money habits are not random. They are reflections of the world that shaped you. And when you understand what Generation X experienced, their financial decisions start to make perfect sense.